And that doesn't take away from the value, I think, of having you both here to do this. So I'll turn this over to you two, and what I want out of this is for you to let people know everything you think they should know, and then to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Okay. And Scott prepared stuff from what he's been getting for information from National Weather Service, the Corps of Engineers, and so on. I've prepared some other stuff for our local systems, and we merged the two together so that we'll give you a pretty good feel for how things should look. So there's a lot of things to consider. We've got our local systems that I deal with all the time. Scott's looking from a larger perspective, and including in his stuff will be the upcoming forecast, some of the long-term stuff, and then wanted to kind of mention that this actually segues well into our flood preparedness stuff. Probably 2 years ago, I met with the council, and Scott and I met with the Brown County Commission about flood preparedness, making sure that we had certain things in place prior to anything happening. So this gives us a good chance to review that and make sure that we're aware of what's in that plan. Our local drainage system, we've got Moccasin Creek, a lot of the drainage ditches, our larger storm sewers, holding ponds, lift stations, smaller size storm sewers, inlets and curbs and gutters. The regional system that affects us, can very negatively affect us, would be the James River system and the Elm River system. And that's part of what Scott will talk about. Moccasin Creek, we went into the winter relatively low. The fact that we added those low flow pipes on the previous project helped us get water levels as low as we could get on Moccasin Creek. And we've been doing cattail management, which, as most people will recall, you couldn't even see the creek most of the time during the summer or going into spring. We started out with ice jammed up in cattails. Now that's not an issue for us. Drainage ditches, because of the dryness of the last 2 years, those drainage ditches have been able to be mowed, which we couldn't do in the past. During the wet years, those ditches, basically we could mow the tops off after ice formed in the winter. Trunk sewers are fully open, and our holding ponds and lift stations are being monitored, and we can turn those on when we need to get rid of some water out of those. We haven't turned any on really at this point, just to allow the system to clear downstream. A lot of the smaller size storm sewers, we spent the entire week, our crews spent the whole week last week steaming out, thawing out those pipes to make sure that those smaller pipes are available when the water's trickling in. The inlets, they also did the same thing. They were clearing those to make sure that the water is able to get out and get away from the properties and back to where that needs to go into the storm sewers. And of course, we had a lot of drainage issues just related to how far out the snow is in the curb lines right now. For those that it became really critical, where water was getting up close to properties, homes, we did cut some of that ice and snow out so that we could get water away from properties. Other than that, what's there is more of a nuisance, and the water will find its way under those ice jams and will get out here in the near future. Flood preparedness plan, it discusses the coordination of an EOC, Emergency Operations Center, gives us call lists that we can call out for activation, public awareness, things just like this to allow people to understand what it is that we're thinking is going to happen and how it's going to happen, and that should happen before the event if it's going to happen, and perhaps some other stuff during the event if needed. It gives us where we should be concerned on the creek, where levels reach certain points. We should be doing certain procedures and taking care of certain things during those times. Talks about the equipment we have available and gives us examples of sandbagging some of those things. With that said, now I'm going to kick into Scott's presentation,
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Robin, and thanks, Mayor and the Commission for having us over. It is getting to be go time, and you can follow the news that it's working its way up our gracious state from the southern end to the northern end, and so we've been doing actually quite a bit of work. So if I just put together a few slides, and I want you to keep an eye on some of these dates. So this first one is the modeled snow depth dating back last week. Last Monday, actually, or last week anyway, and it's showing, in that 12 to 16 range, somewhere in there, and that is kind of reading somewhat. It may be a little bit high. What our actual samples are that we take with the National Weather Service. And Robin, if you go to the next one, this is the current one today that came out. You can see a little bit of a change. It's dropped a little bit down to that 8 to 10, a few spots a little higher. I've been doing a little bit of touring around the county and stuff like that, and like I said, some of this is the model stuff. Maybe I say a little high from what I see. Now there's some areas, up in the hills and stuff that probably are correct with that, 8 to 10, 12 foot or 12 inch snow depth yet. So these next couple slides are the snow water equivalent, and again, this is last week's, and you can see we're in that 4 to 6 range for part of the county, 2 to 4. And last week, our modeled samples were showing about 4.7 water equivalent. So again, it's fairly close from what the computers are telling us. And then this week, Robin, if you go to the next one, you can again see that it did change a little bit. Today's sample came down to 3.7. So we're losing that snow. It is starting to disappear. I don't think it's probably soaking into the ground yet. There's still some frost out there. The Weather Service is telling me there's 39 inches of frost. I think that's a little high. I talked to Northern Electric, who was doing polls last week from the storm, and they're seeing very minimal frost in some spots. So again, I think there's some spots that are going to soak up some water. There's other spots where it's going to be a while before it starts to run in. So here is the river gauges. This is current as of about noon today. We've actually got 3 river gauges that we actually forecast off of, or the National Weather Service, and Westport is one of them. The Elm River being in what I call the danger zone for the city of Aberdeen. You can see over the last week or so, it's increased a little bit, so there is a little bit of runoff getting to the rivers. Next one there, Robin. This actually shows the National Weather Service's flooding forecast for the Elm River at Westport. So the dark blue is greater than 90% chance, up to the yellow, which is a 10 to 25% chance of flooding. So as you can see, the Weather Service is not concerned about the Elm River. Now, take that with a little grain of salt. I'm not overly worried, but I am a little optimistic that this is maybe a little underdone. The snowpack that we have is up in the hills, the Elm Lake areas, things like that. I talked to Dickey County. There's plenty of snow in Dickey County. So again, I don't know what to tell you on this, except that I think it's maybe a little underdone. But again, this is the only information that I have. Also, this is based on March 10th. I've been begging the Weather Service to give us some updates, and they're so busy with stuff going on in other areas, and they said we have to wait our turn. So again, I'm trying to stay positive here about the elm, that it's not going to cause us any problems, and again, according to this, this looks actually fairly decent. So. The next one is the James River at Columbia. That's another modeling point, and again, you can see this is current as of this morning, 7:15. It's went up and went down with the melting and thawing and freezing and stuff like that. There's still ice on both of these rivers, but the River Forecast Center does have, and the next one, Robin, showing a little bit different story here for the James. A greater than 90% chance that it's going to get to moderate flooding. Here's the story and my experience with the James River. it causes problems. It floods some roads. It floods a whole lot of ag land. People have moved out of the James River flood basin. There's not a whole lot of structures in that area. So the river, unless it gets to that major or record stage, which is over 19 feet, moderate flood stage on the James River does not worry me. Okay, again, we're going to lose some township roads. We may lose a county road or something like that, but it's not going to be detrimental to the county or the city of Aberdeen or any other municipality. So again, it looks ugly, but I'm not overly concerned about this, again, because it's, and again, I don't want to put our farmers down that it's just affecting ag land, but it's not affecting homes and stuff like that. So this is information that we got out of Jamestown, the Jamestown and Pipestem reservoirs, and the red areas is what I want you to focus on. First of all, the flood storage at Jamestown and Pipestem reservoirs is all currently available, so they have room to take water. The snowpack up into the, if you look at the third paragraph, the snow accumulation is about 3.75 water equivalent north of the dam, so there's not a whole lot of moisture up there. And their combined releases that they're expecting are below 750 CFS, which is fairly minimal. I mean, that's some good flow, but we see that on a normal spring runoff. So again, I'm not too worried about what's coming out of Jamestown right now, unless they get some horrific, 60, 70 degree days for a week or so and all their snow melts. So the last line we kind of covered again, our snow depth today was at 10 inches, 3.7 water equivalent. This is down last week from 16 and 4.5. So again, we're getting rid of the snow and the water. So the next one is just kind of the forecast for the next couple weeks. You can see it's in our favor. Some 40s and 50s. Wednesday looks like maybe we're going to have to get a little excited and really pay attention to see what's going on. I'm guessing we're going to start seeing some overland flooding, maybe a little street flooding, a few township roads that got culverts, things like that. But again, I'm not expecting anything because the forecast after that drops back down below freezing at night, which is we can thaw during the day, we can slow it down at night. So again, the weather's in our favor. A few of these next slides are just the long-range forecast. You can see the 6 to 10 day outlook. Again, below normal temps, equal chances for precip. Nothing, even the next slide is the 8 to 14 day. Again, there's nothing that's concerning me as far as, a big rainstorm or another big snowstorm or something coming in to affect our snow melt. So like I said, Mother Nature is being very nice to us right now. And we're getting some nice thaw days and some cool evenings and overnights, which is helping the process. Right now, I'm not overly worried. We've made sure we've got enough sandbags. The things that Robin and his crew's been doing to open up for the city. Talking with Dirk, talking with our partners where we're getting water from, Dickey County and Marshall County and folks like that. And again, we're going to have some flooding. Is it going to be historic? I don't think so. Again, 150 degree day or, a bunch of 50 degree days, that could change a little bit. But right now I think it's pretty safe to say that we're not going to have a citywide catastrophe.
Okay, I know we did have some people come. Any of you who came to hear this have any questions after what you've heard, or any more? When do we think sump pumps might come into play here?
Well, we typically try to have the sump pumps pumping outside April 1. That's our target date normally. We'll keep an eye on the forecast. I hesitate to do that if it's not causing us a lot of grief down at the wastewater plant. We may delay that just a little bit just because of how much snow and ice is still out in the streets, and we don't want to create a driving hazard because it's freezing at night. So we may play with that a little bit and decide maybe it's better off to be pushed back a week or something like that.
One thing I'd like you to comment on, just to put people's mind at ease. I got a lot of calls last week with people seeing water accumulating either in their driveway or in the street in front of them, and worried that all that water was going to end up in their basement. And maybe you could talk about the correlation between surface water and basement water.
Well, first of all, we went into the winter extremely dry. Our groundwater levels were as low as I can remember, I'll put it that way. It's going to take quite a bit of soaking in before things actually start really raising that water table to levels that we remember back in the maybe mid to late 90s, early 2000s. They were really high at that time, every spring. We're not going to be to that level, it does not look like, because as Scott said, things are frozen right now. So a lot of this snowpack is going to run off before it ever reaches the groundwater. So I think we're in pretty good shape from that. A lot of the conditions, because we were so dry, a lot of the conditions really favor us. Things just kind of soaking into wetlands, mitigating themselves right now, I think, is probably the best thing that could happen. And then these mild temperatures, really help us. And not having that big rain, it would be an entirely different scenario if we got the rain that Sioux Falls or Yankton got, that's for sure.
Scotty, did your cohorts down there, were they sitting there with the understanding that if they got a rain like that, this was going to happen, or was this a surprise for them?
No, I think for the most part, they were somewhat prepared. I think it caught them a little off guard. With the water that was coming out of the Missouri, and into Yankton, I think they were expecting some flooding. I don't know that they were expecting it to that magnitude.
Any other questions from the council, or I don't know if the council been getting any? Would have been different if we'd have done this a week ago with worrying about rain, but appreciate.
I think, like I said, Wednesday will be an interesting day. Again, I don't think that it's going to be detrimental. I think we're going to see a lot of water start moving. Obviously, I think we're prepared just as well as this, the county and the city. We've been working with all our municipalities. Everybody's got a plan put together. So, and like I said, we've got sandbags and stuff if we need to scramble quick and do stuff. So.
Okay. Oh, and we've got a county commissioner here, you and Robin. Load limits, potholes. What are we expecting here for roads and streets?
Load limits. We're planning on putting load limits on this week, and. Driving around the county yesterday and on Saturday, I'm not seeing a lot of weeping through the cracks yet, but it's starting. So I think now's the time to do it before we start seeing some detrimental things on the roadways. So,
got to get ready for all those soybean trucks this summer. Okay. Well, thanks both. Scotty, we'll let you, go and get back to what you're doing, and anytime you want to update us, let us know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As soon as we get and I will, when we get updated information on the river forecast and stuff like that, we'll push it through Robin and stuff, and he can distribute it as needed, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
But we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Gail from the chamber is here.
Actually, Lisa Anderson's doing the presentation.
Okay,
She
Lisa.
manages the city marketing for you.
And others, if you are here just to hear about the water and you don't want to hang around, you don't have to, but it's up to you. So you're welcome to stay.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Thanks for having this chamber back to kind of give you guys a recap of 2018 city marketing activities. I just want to say that it's really my pleasure to do this. It's always exciting to be able to toot our horn and tell everybody else about what wonderful things Aberdeen has going for it. So I always enjoy doing it. So I just wanted to give you a little recap. The first page beyond the front page there is a breakdown of the percentage of the money spent of the $110,000 that we received of the city marketing money to use for marketing the city in 2018. And you can just kind of see the percentage breakdown there. We ran consistently radio all 12 months on our local Dakota Broadcasting and Hub City radio stations. That was primarily just encouraging the people from within listening range, which is 60 to 100 miles depending on the station, just inviting them to come shop, eat, play, and stay with us. the different events we have going on, the different activities, even just such things like come and spend time on our rec trails and at our water park and, those sorts of things. So really it's just kind of reminding people that we're here, that we're open for business, and that we always want people to come and see what's new and exciting here. So, and then we also did a little regional radio for holiday shopping, Mulbridge, Watertown, Jamestown. Just kind of got our reminder out there for people. Like in Watertown, if there's somebody from Clark, we'd really rather have them come here, obviously, than go somewhere else to shop. So just kind of reminding them that we have stores that are ready to help serve them. TV we ran consistently throughout the year on KSFY, Kello, and Midco. Production Monkeys and Elm Digital Marketing each had done a brand new ad for us last year, and so we alternated those and ran throughout the year on different programming. I tried to do mostly news and sports, things that people tend to watch live. Made sure I was in things like Northern, if Northern was playing an SIC game or something like that we would be in there to help support them. We did some promotional items. People are always wanting pens and things like that. They come into the chamber a lot to find out if we have something to then that sort of thing to be able to advertise Aberdeen. So we make sure we try to have that stuff on hand. McQuillan Creative Group was contracted again last year to do photography. We are pretty happy with very happy with what they did, but pretty happy with where we're at for a level of photos that we have available. Anybody that wants to use them for city marketing, there's a Smug Mug site for Aberdeen. Anybody can go take those down and use them for if they want to promote the city. So it's just all different things from storybook land to arts in the park to pretty much anything, just anything, the outdoor concerts, lots of different things. So even the history camp, little things that you wouldn't think about, but just lots of great pictures of Aberdeen and those sorts of things. So we did some print supporting and some sponsorship, supported Hub City Hot Shots and the Wings and Snow Queen, things like that. One of our big expenditures for print was the Delta Sky magazine. South Dakota was featured in June last year, and I think I shared that with you last time I was here, but Aberdeen had a part in that to make sure that we were represented in South Dakota. And that magazine was actually distributed all over the world in Delta, in the seat backs for all the Delta fleet. So that was pretty cool, although it was expensive, but we made it work. We can, as last year, as we are this year, continue to work with Elm Digital Marketing on Facebook promotion and Aberdeen gift card giveaways. What we do is we put up an ad with video of Aberdeen and then invite people to comment, like, and share. And then anybody that signs up for a drip marketing campaign, they get their name in the drawing for the $100 gift card. We actually ended up drawing cards last year for people from Watertown, Webster, Eureka, Aberdeen, Huron, Redfield, and Mulbridge. So we really can see that we're getting that kind of regional effect with that. And there's a lot of people from all over that are now getting monthly emails, just kind of letting them know that what's happening in Aberdeen. So to remind them that they can come here and have some fun. And then we also did Shop Local Small Business Saturday. So the next page just has the screenshot of our Facebook marketing and the results, the link clicks, and how many people were reached, etc. So that gives you an idea of the statistics for that. And then the last page, we worked with Midco on some digital, and that those statistics are there as well. So, for example, anybody who has their internet, Midco's their internet provider, those ads would appear on certain web pages. So, and also as an update on Sharing the Spirit, we purchased 18 new banners last spring to replace some that had been destroyed by the weather the year before. We did end up using a different material that Quality Quick Print helped us pick out, and they did seem to do much, much better. So I think we kind of have that figured out now, which material works best here for wind and heat and cold and all that. So And then also we used a little Sharing the Spirit money. We have our annual holiday lighting contest for businesses, and they get a little stipend to help them supplement their lighting at the end of the year. So, any questions on anything?
Anyone?
Okay, great. Again, thank you. It's a pleasure, very much a pleasure to help promote our wonderful city. So let me know if you guys have any suggestions at any time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm just going to tell Robin to
Okay.
flip over to me.
All right. Next on our agenda, we have the consent calendar with a list of routine city business operations to be approved. I need a motion to do that.
Are we
Or
doing
old
that?
business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The
Old
most
business
important
first.
one for the evening.
So, under old business, offered tonight for possible second reading is the Emerald Ash Borer ordinance. And we have some people who have talked to some of the council members. I know I haven't talked to them personally, who have some input on this, as well as from the city attorney. In order to get things started here, I would just entertain a motion for that second reading, and that'll open up further discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Slade Hansen, second by Lundsman. I'll turn that over to the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. The administration would like to recommend two changes, both minor, to the ordinance as you see before you. I have redlined those changes. The first, there are two places within the ordinance where it is written as plant diagnostic lab, and in both instances, I would like it to be plant diagnostic laboratory.
Have we lost one of our people on speaker?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear us?
Rob said that he's cut off.
Hello?
Okay,
So let's just take a minute, see if we can reconnect. So.
sure, I can do that. There we go.
They can both call in.
I think I can get them on. Is Clint still on?
No,
Nobody there.
Okay.
no one answered.
Hello.
Hello, Clint. We have you on. I'm going to try to get on Rob again, okay?
All right.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, Rob. Are the two of you on there? Rob?
I know I'm here. Clint.
Okay.
Rob is here.
Okay. There we go.
How long ago did we lose you?
I don't know. On and just off, I guess.
All right. Back to you.
All right. Administration is proposing two minor changes to the ordinance that's been moved for second reading. The first change has to do with two instances within the document where it is identified as plant diagnostic lab, and we'd like that to read plant diagnostic laboratory. And the second minor change has to do with language in section 56-252 sub 7. And in that is the licensing requirement, and there's a reference to providing proof of excise tax number. We were informed that not all of the tree services have excise tax numbers. So the proposed change to sub 7 of 56-252 would be proof of state tax number. And then the language would read, an applicant for a license under this chapter shall be required to supply his or her state sales use or excise tax number to the city. And those are the changes that the
Okay.
administration would like to see.
We would need to do these separately because they're separate things. So I would entertain a motion to change lab to laboratory.
Second.
Motion Slade Hansen, second by Bunces. Any questions on that? Carl, roll call for the amendment to change lab to laboratory.
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Slate Hansen.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Mayor Rimley. Or Mayor Leeson.
Aye. Motion carries, and it is amended to say that. I would now entertain a motion to change the language relating to the state tax number and the state sales use or excise tax number as explained by the city attorney.
Moved.
Second.
Motion Olson and second by Johnson. Questions on this one? Carl?
Councilmember Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Slate Hansen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Leeson.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, so we've got the administrative stuff out of the way.
We've got those, and I will
Yes.
keep this document up on screen just in
Okay.
case there are any additional changes.
David, you asked for the delay last time. Do you want to start the discussion here with where we should go from here, or are there changes you should propose, or?
I have no changes to propose right now because I would really like to hear
Oh.
the tree service
Okay,
people.
they'd
what they have
indicated to you
say.
that they, okay. So I would invite anybody from the public here that wants to address the council and has questions, or just come up and identify yourself and tell us what we need to hear.
Good evening. My name's Keith Miller, and my family and I own and operate K&A Log Furniture LLC, a small business that builds log furniture and log homes, provides log beams and lumber and other products from our sawmill. We're also one of Brown County's largest firewood suppliers. I've been involved in forestry since 1990 when I was awarded a forestry scholarship for a summer school program in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania that focused on forest health and management. In 1992, I received that scholarship again to further my education. 95-96, I was president of a 5-member team that participated in environmental awareness competitions where I specialized in wildlife and forestry. In 97, we placed first of 37 teams for county competition, and I had the privilege of competing at a state level. In 1998, I passed the testing required by the Timber Managers Association and received my timber cutter certification. That year, I was the chief cutter on a logging crew that harvested approximately 4.9 million board feet of timber. Since then, I've been active in forestry management and the arboreal field, and I've worked in 14 states and 1 Canadian province. I don't tell you this to impress you with my credentials or abilities, but to inform you that I have been involved in and knowledgeable of forestry issues for my entire adult life. Bear in mind that infestations and invasive tree diseases are nothing new to the forests of North America. Nationally, we have dealt with almost 500 native, non-native, tree-feeding insects and disease-causing pathogens since the 1700s. About 80 of these have caused significant damage to certain tree species and populations. Some of these you may have heard of: chestnut blight, beech bark disease, thousand cankers in black walnut, and of course the Dutch elm disease that wiped out so many of our stately elms here in Aberdeen. The vast majority of these diseases and insects were introduced through foreign shipping on the East Coast, and they take root and spread in the vast hardwood forests of the Appalachian Mountains. Then the population spread by breeding dispersion or transportation dispersion. Breeding dispersion is a natural process of population growth through procreation, but transportation dispersion is where we need to focus our efforts here in Aberdeen. The reason this is important is because in the northern plains, ash tree populations are frequently farther apart than the travel capacities of the emerald ash borer. Most of the spread of the emerald ash borer in the Midwest has been by the transportation of infested wood or nursery stock, but not for 10, 20, or even 30 miles. Not intra-county, but interstate transportation is responsible for the rapid long-distance dispersion. I brought a map that I'll share with you later, or you can pass around, that shows the spread of the EAB in the Midwest. You can see that the interstate corridors are highlighted to show how the spread of EAB is directly tied to transportation dispersion. When this proposed ordinance first came across my desk, I was opposed to it in its entirety. But in keeping with my policy of personal interaction before public confrontation, I called our city forester and requested a visit. He promptly called me back, and we had a conversation that exceeded an hour. We discussed my concerns, and Aaron pointed out some of the EAB studies that I was not aware of, and he explained his motivation behind the proposed ordinances. He also made me aware of some potential issues that I hadn't even considered. Our conversation was informative, and I appreciate the time he took away from his schedule to visit with me. The information provided changed my mind, and instead of an elimination of the ordinance, I think it just needs some changes to allow it to best serve our community. With that being said, please allow me to point out some ambiguous wording, some vague references, and other areas in the language of this ordinance that potentially open the city to lawsuits and liabilities. After that, I have a sheet of suggested edits and additions that I feel would make this ordinance more beneficial to Aberdeen. If you would look at the ordinance, you'll see under 56-33, line 3 states that elm or ash wood cannot be stored with the bark on. The University of Michigan has been studying the insect since it was discovered in Michigan in 2002. Here is a quote from the portion of their study that deals with EAB dispersion. I quote, "Ash trees can simply be cut and left on the ground. After cutting, the phloem and the wood dry out, and after 6 to 12 months, even large pieces of ash will no longer be suitable for EAB egg laying or larval development." And of course, they're referring to uninfested ash trees. The old ordinance for elm wood was because the vectors for Dutch elm disease were 3 species of bark beetle that feed on dead and dying wood, thus making the storage of firewood with the bark on, even if it wasn't previously infested, a potential breeding site for diseased beetles. I'm not suggesting leaving infested trees lying around, but uninfested trees that are cut up and split will not be suitable breeding or feeding sites for the EAB. After a winter like we just endured, when firewood stocks countywide were almost entirely depleted, the city is not going to be able to effectively limit the firewood someone uses to heat their house. Staying warm and surviving will always trump an ordinance. Furthermore, the best method for destroying the EAB is indeed burning. See the section under 5639. In 5636, line 2 is very vague. Any tree determined to be a public nuisance can be forcibly removed in an unspecified time period, see 5639, for an unspecified cost. And if you don't pay that unknown cost, it will be added to your taxes, or you will be sued in small claims court and have a judgment entered, potentially damaging your credit and leaving you the confiscation of your possessions. Section 5642 is too inclusive in that it states that you cannot transport any ash wood, even if it is uninfected, kiln dried, sawn into boards, or treated, any part of the ash tree. Technically, not even ash furniture or cabinetry. Article 5, which deals with the licensing in 56-250, requires all persons who cut or trim any tree, not just ash or elm, for money or, in quotes, valuable consideration, must have an arborist license that can only be granted by the city forester. So by extension, a neighbor cannot help another neighbor cut down their spruce tree if they give him a gift card, a 50, a case of pop, anything, unless he has an arborist license that can only be granted by one unelected individual. Furthermore, no tree trimming business may operate in Aberdeen without this same license, regardless of their experience, qualifications, or having previously operated a tree service business for years. So one individual now controls the entire tree trimming or removal business in all of Aberdeen. Also, that same one person is in charge of awarding contracts to private sector businesses, if necessary, for tree trimming, or for hiring additional crews for the city to take down trees that the same individual deems a nuisance, and charging any price he deems necessary for the same removal. This could potentially open up the city forester to unnecessary liability and corruption allegations. Section 56-252 states that a license will be issued to anyone who makes an application on forms provided by the city forester, pays the required fees to the city forester, with no idea currently of how much these fees will be, meets the requirements put forth by the city forester, and passes an examination conducted by the city forester. And you have to do this every year. While speaking with Mr. Keys, he stated that he did not know what the fees for this license would be, or if it would be, in quotes, free or of no charge. Well, unfortunately, no government service, as we know, is free. So the question is, will the arborist or will the citizens pay for the test? Either way, unfortunately, the citizens will have to pay for it because the cost will be passed to them through the arborist or through the taxes. Also, no license will be issued without $1 million of liability insurance and workman's comp. So very few laypersons or people and neighbors will ever get licensed or be able to help out their neighbor because the average homeowner does not carry a $1 million commercial liability policy. Or they will do it anyway, ignore the requirements, pocket the $100, and negate the entire bill. Mr. Keys informed me this is for the protection of the homeowner. While I agree that the liability insurance requirement would help protect the homeowner, the work comp requirement is not necessarily the duty of the city to require, and it doesn't protect the homeowner. Furthermore, the liability insurance companies already require workman's comp for all employees. There's also a few omissions in this proposal. This ordinance should have specific end zones. There needs to be parameters so that these limitations end when we're federally quarantined or when the EAB threat has ended or enveloped the city. Also, there's no mention of prohibiting infected firewood or nursery stock from entering our area, despite that being the number one factor of the emerald ash borer's spread. In summary, parts of this ordinance are vague, have some unnecessary requirements, adversely limit the ability of a business to perform a service, add unneeded expense, and have portions that would require inordinate amount of time and money to enforce. In this time when litigation abounds, the city of Aberdeen does not need to open itself up to lawsuits and negative public relations. It has also come to my attention that there were many interested and affected parties who are unaware of the existence of the entire proposal. There needs to be a more concerted effort at contacting all individuals in the full or part-time business of tree care, lawn care, firewood retailing, or landscaping. The public also needs to be made aware of the ordinance as it affects the population of Aberdeen both financially and aesthetically. We need to be proactive in combating the potential arrival of the emerald ash borer. Limiting potentially infested sources from entering Aberdeen and providing educational materials to Aberdeen residents are our best weapons, and as such, I propose some amendments to this ordinance. For one, local ash wood determined to be uninfected, debarked, kiln-dried, or treated should not have the same regulations as infested wood. Secondly, businesses that have been in the operation in the arborist or forestry field for a certain time period should be grandfathered into the license upon proof of liability insurance. Also, the license should be renewable every 3 or 5 years, not annually. The cost should be determined and the dollar amount stated in the ordinance. Furthermore, a completed copy of the test should be available for the perusal of all concerned before the passage of this ordinance is entertained. Third, the time frame for the future repeal of this ordinance needs to be specified. For example, when the occurrence of an infestation has occurred in all 4 compass quadrants of the city, this ordinance becomes null and void, or when we're federally quarantined, whatever index is most reasonable. And fourth, the implementation of proactive measures. We need to increase public education and awareness and prohibit landscape trees and firewood from being brought into our city. A week ago, I saw a stack of firewood at the CXVS gas station on 6th Avenue. This wood originated in Crow Wing County, Minnesota, close to the edge of the quarantined EAB area, and contains significant amounts of ash with the bark on. We have a lengthy ordinance on the methodology of dealing with the EAB when it arrives, but how about some language that would prevent or delay its arrival? We can't limit visitors, but we can make our population aware of the looming crisis, and we can limit what landscape trees and firewood enter our area. All bark on ash firewood and any species of firewood that is untreated or not kiln dried needs to originate from within a radius specified by the city forester. For instance, 25, 50, 100 miles of Aberdeen. All nursery stock needs to be from EAB-free areas or have been treated. Every retailer of any of those products needs to be aware of the pending crisis. I have a summary of what I just gave you, which I can pass around. I don't know if I have enough, you'll have to share, but I certainly appreciate the time took to entertain my suggested changes.
We appreciate the time you took to prepare to come and talk to us. So the 4 things that you mentioned, if those 4 were addressed in a manner satisfactory to you, you would have no other objections to the ordinance?
I would find the ordinance to be beneficial.
Okay. Aaron, good time for a viewpoint from the City Forestry Department.
Can I get, do you have a copy of the 4 changes?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right here.
You can look at the last notes too if you want.
All right, thank you.
Ron just mentioned, any of the other people connected to the tree service industry want to speak before we hear from Aaron?
No, I would rather hear from Aaron first.
Okay.
I guess the first thing, when I originally gave my presentation a couple weeks ago, Dr. John Ball couldn't make it due to the weather, but he did make it here today. If the council doesn't mind, I think I'll have John come up too, so he can address anything that he'd like to address on this as well, but just looking at number one, local ash wood determined to be uninfected, debarked, kiln dried, or treated should not have the same regulations as infested wood. I guess that my issue with that would be is who's going to be running around looking at every ash or every piece of wood that comes down to determine whether that's infested or not. That would be my main concern, is we'd have to have a crew of people going and looking at every tree that comes down or every branch that comes down to determine whether it's infested with EAB.
But isn't that what you're asking the tree service to do right now in this ordinance, is to maybe determine that tree is infested, so in a period of time, and they have to remove that and take it to the landfill or wherever the designated spot is?
Well, once EAB is found in Aberdeen, we don't expect the tree services to look at or inspect every tree that they work on. It would be a matter of saying that it's here now. We have to put this. The ordinance will go into place, so there won't be any cutting from May 1st to September 1st, or we'll have specific drop sites that we would encourage people to take, whether it's the landfill or whether we have other sites. But actually, once it's found here, then the ordinance will go into effect. But we would not expect tree services to inspect every single tree that they come into contact with to determine whether the beetle is in it or not. We would hope that they take time to look it over and let us know if they do find signs or symptoms so we can come take a look. But it'd be very time consuming to inspect every single branch of every tree that they work on. And I know John does a lot in Sioux Falls. They're out looking for insects during the wintertime. It's not a matter of just going up and looking at the tree. I mean, it involves stripping bark, stripping wood. I mean, it's time consuming if you're actually going to dig in and actually look for the insect.
And to add, and it's John Ball, the Forest Health Specialist for the state of South Dakota, also the Extension Forestry Specialist for the state, Campus Arborist, Professor of Forestry. I've been working on this type of insect for 40 years, did my PhD at Michigan State on Agralis, which this is, managed tree care companies before coming here. So I've been working on this type of insect for 40 years. Aaron's right. You're not going to be able to tell whether an ash is infested or not. Once it's found in Aberdeen, in order to find it in the tree, you would literally strip every piece of bark off the entire tree. I've had it where we've cut down some of our trees for a winter study, and you find it in one branch. That's it. Sometimes you find it throughout the trunk. So the assumption is, once it's here, since you can't tell if it's infested or not, just as we did in Sioux Falls, since we found it the first week of May last year, it was nobody's cutting ash all summer long. Because what we didn't want is people cutting an ash tree and moving it around the city, thereby spreading it faster. So, since nobody can identify whether or not the tree has it for positive, I mean, there are some signs of an infested tree, you just have to assume that once the ordinance goes into effect and you have found it in Aberdeen, that you have to almost assume every tree potentially could have it, every ash tree. And that's standing ash trees. The other part to it, too, is that if you just cut the tree down and remove the bark, this insect also will go into the xylem. It actually goes deeper into the wood. So you almost need to slab it, take off the outer piece of wood as well. He is correct, though. Once it's been out for a year and dry, the beetles will not infest a dead tree. In other words, if I cut down an infested tree right now, this summer it would release adults for the entire summer long. They've got that far in their development. But it would not become reinfested. So once it's cut up into fireplace links and that and gone through the flight period, it's no longer an issue. It will not become reinfested. But if I cut the tree down anytime during the winter, any beetles that are in it will emerge the following summer, sometime between May and September, and then they can spread.
Do you know of any municipality that evaluates, cut, ash trees as to whether they are infested or not and treats them differently?
No, just because of the difficulty. Okay. Good example, last week I was up at Minneapolis at a conference, and I was talking to some of the people up there too as their work as well, and it's the same thing. They have in a tree that, well, we think it's infested. They stripped all the bark off, they haven't found it, and then 2 branches it was in. But it was sufficient numbers in those 2 branches that you were going to have a spread. So the assumption is the ash is infested once it's found in the community.
Okay, number 2, businesses that have been in operation in the arborist or forestry field for a certain time period should be grandfathered into the license upon proof of liability insurance. And it's funny, John and I were visiting about that before the meeting tonight, and Keith had brought up the grandfathered on the phone last week, but John had brought it up as well. And actually, I really wouldn't have an issue with that. I think we'd have to determine, whether they, like it says here, 5, 8, 10 years. I don't think we'd want to, go out to 10 years, but we'd have to determine a time period. Say, if they've been in a tree operating as a tree service since 2015 or 16, we could grandfather them in. I really wouldn't have any opposition to that. So. The license should be renewable every 3 to 5 years, not annually. I really disagree with that. I think in order for us to monitor and maintain licenses appropriately, I think it really has to be every year. That way we can ensure annually that they do have the proper liability insurance, that they don't have to retake the test every year. It would just be coming in, filling out an app saying, here's my proof of sales tax license, here's my proof of liability insurance. Really, that's, if they change their address, we can get an updated address or an updated email address. It really would be a simple process to do it annually, and that way we can keep our records more up to date than dragging it out 3 to 5 years.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
To me, the value of the license, and Sioux Falls has one, is that it allows you some control over who's doing the work in your community. I worked on the mountain pine beetle in the Black Hills, where anyone could come in, do the spraying, anyone could come in and do the cutting, and we had difficulty with some people that were not doing very good work, but it was very difficult to get them out of business. They're spraying trees that without the right chemical or without any chemical in it, or at best the homeowner who happened to have the camera and saw the person walk around, just put the bill in the door and leave. No spraying was done, period. Sioux Falls has a license, and the beauty of that license is if you're doing things wrong, they can take your license. For example, the fellow who was guaranteeing trees that he treated for EAB would never become infested, and I pointed out he was absolutely correct because he was injecting hackberry trees. They do not become infested. And also, again, the movement of wood, because once it arrives, just like the Black Hills, once we had mountain pine beetle, lots and lots of companies came in, to kind of take the cream off. Same you're going to find in Aberdeen, because it'll be gone through Sioux Falls fairly far by then. And it's nice to have a mechanism, however you want to do it, that if you find a company that is not doing the proper work, for example, right now, we're doing spot checks in the community that this spring and last fall, we're checking leaves, and if we don't find the right amount of chemical in those leaves, then the company didn't put enough chemical in it. Right now, we're taking the carrot approach. In other words, it's your first year probably. We want to show you what was done. It wasn't done right. How can we improve it? But as Dwayne says, but if you don't, your license is gone. And so it has actually made my job a lot easier by having the licenses as part of the mechanism.
Thanks, John. Letter C, the cost should determined and the dollar amount stated in the ordinance, and that's fine. As I told Keith, it's going to be anywhere from $0 to $30. There's really we don't incur a lot of costs to do a licensing like this. It's a piece of, a little paperwork and administer a 20-point exam. So, I guess Ron and I and Doug can have that conversation.
Yeah, and I will inform the council, of course, later in the year there will be the annual city fee schedule that's put together. By the way, in the process of doing a recodification, we've been advised to eliminate a lot of the dollar amounts in our ordinances and put all of that into a city fee schedule. So this, along with a number of other items, are going to be added into the city fee schedule for the council's consideration. And again, we'll put a number in there that makes sense and isn't a loss leader for us.
Right. It won't be $1,000.
What do you charge in Sioux Falls?
That I don't know what their current rate is. I mean, it's under $100. I know that.
All right. A completed copy of the test should be available for the perusal of all concerned before the passage. So, basically, we're handing out the test, I guess. That would be a problem, I think. So, I would be against that. Like I've said, it's a 20-point test. If you've been doing tree work for any amount of time, you're not going to have a problem passing this test. It's a, and I know David's going to come in and take a look at it, and I invite anybody to, of the council to come in and take a look and help calm some fears. So,
again, is there a test in Sioux Falls?
Yes, there is, to become a licensed. Now, again, in Sioux Falls, though, for example, I'm a board certified master arborist, and Aaron is a certified arborist. If you show you've taken a test, become certified either at the state or at a higher level, they can waive that because you've already passed an exam. But there are people that have either. So
is yours as easy as Aaron says ours will be?
Well,
I guess what I'm asking is, did anybody ever fail and not get their license because of the test? Is that?
Oh, that's possible. Yes. I mean, again, though, what sometimes can occur is someone from outside the field says, "Well, I'll just start this." Okay. But if you've been involved in the field at all, by involved in the field, I mean landscaping, lawn care, tree care. But yeah, if you said I've been doing construction work, I'll take the test. You may not pass. Okay.
Right. I agree with that. Okay. The time frame for the future repeal of the ordinance needs to be specified. And John, and I guess this would be up to Ron if this was how this would be inserted. But I know John and I have discussed this, and we feel that once the insect's found in Aberdeen, more than likely within 4 years it's going to be throughout the community, and at that point a lot of the restrictions of the movement within the city could be released. So I guess the wording for I'm not sure if other communities, John, have done that or.
Yeah, I mean, Sioux Falls is the first city in South Dakota that's dealing with it. And I will have to say, it has not moved very far. We've done a great job in slowing the spread. This beetle is lazy. It will only fly about 100 yards if it has to. If there's another ash, it'll go there. So even within a community, the way you're going to move it from one end of Aberdeen to the other end of Aberdeen is on a truck. So the slower you can have it spread through the town, because remember, at the end of the day, you will not have ash left in this town unless they're being treated. So do you want to remove all those ash trees in 3 years? Or do you want to remove all those ash trees over 10 years' time? Because it'll probably take 4 or 5 years if you go slow to infest everything, but it takes about 4 years to kill a tree. So you might look at it as, well, we could spread this out over maybe an 8 or 9 year time period. And when you think of the number of ash trees in town that have to be taken down, and I do want to remind everyone here, the real danger of these is that they are not like elms that you can leave standing dead. These start collapsing very quickly. And I spend a lot of time from here all the way to the East Coast dealing with communities that are now having trees falling in the streets. So it's not something that can be left standing. So the slower we can have this spread, the more time it buys for the city and for the private tree companies to start removing the ash trees.
Dr. Ball, may I ask a question on that? If there is treatment going on and there are successfully treated ash trees, will that extend the period of time by which they're vulnerable to EAB?
For the tree that we treat?
For the successfully treated ash tree that's there, does that mean that as long as there's a healthy ash tree, is there still the risk then of EAB?
Well, there's always a risk of EAB because while we always say you're going to lose all your ash, I can go back to ground zero where it first showed up in Michigan, and there's still ash, but the ash are the size of my thumb. They don't get much larger because the emerald ash borer kills them. So the problem is you're going to have little ash coming up forever along the creeks net. Not any different than if you go where chestnut blight affected it, you have little chestnut still coming up almost 100 years later. So the insect will remain here indefinitely because you'll always have enough little ash out there along creeks and that the population can survive. The treatments themselves, though, are very effective. And, for example, in Sioux Falls, if you have a street tree that you do not want the city to remove because they're already doing preemptive work, that you can have it treated. And the city has a tagging system that if you're treating your tree, there is a tag on it because the treatments are that effective. And, in fact, Sioux Falls, out of the estimated 85,000 ash trees, last year 8,000 trees were treated. And we're hoping about another new 8,000 this year. So, again, we would like to see ash still remain part of the canopy.
So if I were to treat a tree for 8 years, let's say, and get us through that period of time, if I stop treating the tree after 8 years, is it at risk then for EAB?
Yes, good example. When I was in Ohio last year, one of the first states that was hit, there were some people that had treated their trees, and the treatments are every 2 or every 3 years. It's not annual. And they thought, well, most of the trees are gone, we'll stop. And then they lost their trees. And so what we'll find is that because there are fewer beetles, you may be able to stretch it out every 4 years for treatments, possibly even 5 years. But as we tell people, as they do in the other states, look at this as an indefinite process, that there'll always be enough beetles around that if you don't treat your trees at the proper time periods, that you'll probably still lose it.
So the reason for these questions was this tends to militate against sunsetting this particular. Yeah. Is that correct, Doctor?
Well, yeah, you were ahead of me.
Yeah.
I don't want to play poker with you, but you're right that this is a problem that just like chestnut blight will go on indefinitely.
And just as a matter of procedure, whether there's a sunset date on this or not makes no difference because this council can always add a sunset date or push it back or push it forward depending on what happens down the line. So whether or not we put an end date on this is inconsequential.
All right, thank you. Prohibit landscape trees and firewood from being brought into the city. All bark on ash firewood and any species of firewood that is untreated or not kiln dried needs to originate from within a radius specified by the city forester. For instance, 20, 50, 100 miles of Aberdeen, all nursery stock needs to be from EAB-free areas or been treated. I guess I'll let John talk about what's going on in other communities regarding this.
Well, part of the problem is, and we addressed it before, is what the state can do in terms of interstate commerce, how we can limit materials coming in from other states. And that's something an attorney can address far better than me, but I understand there's a lot of rules there that are beyond our ability to work with. In terms of nursery stock, that's a minor problem nowadays because very few people are selling ash. You can occasionally see them at Runnings or Home Depot or that, and those are coming from out west where we don't have emerald ash, where very few people are selling it. Even fewer people seem to want to buy it because you're going to lose the trees. For firewood, the bark would have to be removed. Kiln dried is certainly the best way to do it. One of our difficulties is that one way this insect's been moved is by wood that's been supposedly kiln dried. So now you get to the point of how are you going to check to be sure all this wood has been kiln dried? We see that repeatedly with other problems as well, is that how do you tell for absolutely certain that it has been dried? I've looked at some wood coming from China that was already cut into cabinet wood that still had the beetles alive, and it certainly was not kiln dried. And we've seen that with firewood too. And that, the other problem too, of course, is that, or the other thing is that the feds are probably going to deregulate this insect within the next year. But our state will still be imposing quarantines by county. And when you find it in Brown County, you will not be able to move any ash out of the county. All right. Now, again, they do not restrict the movement into a county once it's infested, but they are restricting it from moving outside of a county. And just like in the quarantine now in Minnehaha County, you can move wood around anywhere within that county. The reason being, that's very hard to regulate. How are you going to stop somebody? But they certainly are trying to stop people from moving it out of the county because we do not want it to spread any faster.
What was your reaction to hearing a comment that he saw some here from shipped here from Minnesota? Does that surprise you?
Oh, no. I mean, you can get on the internet and on Craigslist, you can buy firewood from Iowa, Minnesota, and a number of other places. The state continually deals with this. The difficulty is, how do we stop every small firewood sale? We had someone selling firewood from Iowa, which is entirely under quarantine. All right, selling it shipped to Sioux Falls for $75 a cord. I don't even know how they make a living at that. But again, we're always going to have those small sales.
So your reaction to point number 4 is that would not be useful or could not be done, or what would
I think it would be very difficult to do. For example, a radius thing. How would you determine for every firewood that's coming in? The biggest thing would be is you do not want firewood coming from any quarantine county in South Dakota. Certainly don't want to see it coming from any quarantines outside of the state as well. But I think it would be very difficult to say we're going to make sure it was cut within 25 miles or 50 miles. If it could be done, fine, but I don't know how you'd regulate that.
Okay. Aaron, any other general comments before we hear a rebuttal from our tree people?
The only thing I'll add to the firewood is, what we're doing now is similar to what the state parks is doing within Wiley Park. We're making sure that we're confiscating any firewood that's brought into the park, because we that's our one method, or more simpler method of making sure people aren't bringing their firewood with us. And I know we advertise that as well. Don't bring firewood with you. You can buy it here at the park, and we'll confiscate it if they do bring it. So.
Okay.
And then if I can just add one more comment. These are all good. I mean, firewood movement is a major source of this insect, but it also moves on pallet wood. And we find frequently that it shows up in industrial areas because somebody had pallet wood that still had a piece of bark on it, and they brought it. The insect also hitchhikes. Somebody in Sioux Falls this summer puts a boat cover on and decides to haul the boat up here, and there's a couple of EABs in there. So we tend to find it follows transportation corridors too once it's found. So yes, firewood's the big one. The more we can watch that, the slower you can have the spread, but just a reminder, it's not the only source.
The man in back, you've been waiting to, have you had a comment?
They've touched on most of my name is Ray Bauer. That's my son Alex. We're owners and operators of Bowers Tree Service. I've got little experience. We worked down in 2013 in Sioux Falls after the ice storm.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And we had to go and show our proof of insurance and take the test. I believe at that time, I think it was $25, which we had no problem doing. I thought it was a great idea. They have every tree service listed on their website, so the public can go and look and see when I give them a quote. Oh, yep, he's got insurance and he's licensed. I appreciate being grandfathered in. We're a 4-generation business. My grandfather started doing tree work in South Dakota in '48, and we've been serving the public ever since. We also sell a lot of ash wood, and I, as a responsible arborist, I wouldn't transport it if there is a risk of transporting the disease. and I know there is if it's debarked, or if it's not debarked. I live in Frederick, South Dakota, which is also in Brown County. So legally, by this ordinance, I could take the wood up to Frederick, but I'm not gonna do that if the EAB is found in Aberdeen and it's not found in Frederick yet. I would be taking the disease there, where it could be 2, 3, maybe even longer years before that disease gets there. So even though it's still in that county, I still see an issue with that also. Besides that, I agree with everything they said.
Okay. Do you have response to their response to you?
Yeah, only a couple things. I think we missed a small part of what I was pointing out to in regards to the test. I wasn't suggesting that the test be provided to all the applicants, presenting that it should be provided specifically to you gentlemen before the ordinance is passed, not open ballot type of test. So just so that that's clarified. And again, when I'm referring to firewood being transported, individual sales, like you were saying, Mr. Ball, are absolutely impossible to regulate. But we can regulate retailers. We provide firewood to several gas stations in town. We can regulate whether those retailers get it from an EAB-free area or are using kiln-dried wood. And like Mr. Ball said, kiln-dried is a lot like the catchphrase organic these days, because I can kiln-dry at 100 degrees and that doesn't kill anything, or I can kiln-dry at 165, which kills everything. So he's exactly right. That is a very vague reference, and there's no way to police what temperatures the wood reaches inside, someone's kiln. So I concur with that. But most of the firewood that comes into Aberdeen, the demographics of that suggest it's not coming from far, or it's coming from very far, because Aberdeen, South Dakota is not surrounded by a lot of trees. So either it's us local guys who are getting it from arborists, nobody's logging in this area, or if they are, then it's coming from Minnesota, or we don't get much from Iowa because you have run into a transportation problem. Once you exceed a certain transportational radius within Aberdeen, it no longer becomes economically viable, so we don't get the wood in here. Most of the firewood for sale in the gas stations in town are coming from Minnesota. And being in the industry, I look at the competition. The vast majority, in fact, I don't even know if there's any not from Minnesota. So if we control the retailers, we're going to control most of the wood entering Aberdeen. Aside from, like Mr. Bauer, Frederick, it's Brown County. Anyway, once it's here, Frederick, Aberdeen, while we want to slow the spread there, it sort of becomes a moot point. In reference to the third thing, the sunset clause, please be clear. Once we're quarantined, except for the licensing, the movement of ash is moot. And Mr. Ball can confirm whether or not I'm correct. But once Brown County is quarantined, if we bring ash from Warner to Aberdeen or Aberdeen to Frederick, it doesn't matter anymore. Nobody's going to care once all of Brown County is inside of that quarantine.
The city might. And Sioux Falls restricts movement within their city. What they can do is someone can move it from the city out of the city. But within the city, no. They're really clamping on that because they don't want to have it go any quicker through the town.
And how is that policed?
It's policed two ways. And again, by movement of wood, just by tree companies are pretty good at saying, hey, I saw some wood over there. Or I'll get a call. It's casual. They don't have the ash police out there. But nevertheless, they are watching for it. And quite honestly, most people don't want to see it spread. So they're following it. In fact, we get asked a lot, could we identify the trees to make sure they're not moving ash? So it works out well. So South Dakotans are pretty good folks. To your first one, though, that would be the attorney, because when we looked at it at the state level, could we stop the movement of firewood into the state? Apparently, that's not an easy thing to do. So, because we would have done it at the state level had that been possible.
So you're saying legally we can't ban a specific product from being for sale within the limits of that?
I'm not an attorney. I'm a forester, but.
Oh, we have one right here.
Yeah.
So what the municipality can do, especially a home rule municipality like Aberdeen, has the ability to regulate it regards a public nuisance, a declared public nuisance. And so within that declaration, they can take reasonable measures and to either prohibit the transport within or without of the city limits of a declared nuisance wood is within our regulatory authority. So that whether or not there's a quarantine declared by the county that would impact the entire county as a result of state action, we are able to, as a municipality, through our public nuisance declaration, take additional measures. So.
And again, if I may, that's enforced how?
That's enforced as best we can through our forester and through our licensing provisions. That's how we enforce that.
With fines, or, I mean, what do you?
With fines, with abatement of issues, with the ability of the forester to abate that nuisance, whether it be a finding of wood that shouldn't be, whether somebody is transporting a tree that they shouldn't. The abatement process that you'd referred to earlier is something that we have available in other code enforcement mechanisms that permit us to take care of the problem and if necessary, then assess it against the property owner if that's where it falls on.
To the first point, your concern about the difference between infected and uninfected wood, what the response we heard from them is we treat them the same.
If I'd like to, I'm thinking I was talking to Robin one time. He was talking about contractors. Concrete contractors have a saying that says there's two types of concrete: concrete that's cracked or concrete that will be cracked. So I take it from what you're saying that when you're in an area that has confirmed EAB, there are two types of ash wood: ash wood that is infected or ash wood that will be infected unless it's treated successfully.
Absolutely right.
Okay, and so that's the point here, is that whether it's to the extent that you have ash in an area that's been confirmed as having the infestation, then we have to treat all ash wood as if it is or will be infested.
Okay.
So I have a couple of questions. I made some notes as I was listening here. In regards to the workman's comp issue that that Keith, is that your name? I have that right? That Keith brought up. Tell me if I'm wrong. Workman's comp, I know that's regulated by the state, but if you're an individual sole proprietorship, you don't have to have workman's comp.
That's a requirement. That's set forth in our other licensing strictures, especially with our contractors. But a standard provision that requires them, if they have employees, then they are to have.
Then the state requires.
And that's part of their insurance requirement. And that's natural. If they're, depending on their organizational structure, if they don't have employees, if they're all owners, then of course, then they might not have workers' comp requirements. But to the extent that they have identified employees, then we are requiring that they meet state laws also.
So, to be clear then, we are not requiring anything more in this ordinance than what the state already requires.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So then the question about the cost and the dollar amount for the test. So I have a couple of questions there. One, testing fee versus renewal fee, because Aaron said you wouldn't give the test every year. So there might be something that we want to look at there. If it's just a renewal, then costs less than actually administering a test. I'm wondering about a fine. What does the fine fall under? What ordinance or what fine schedule does that fall under if we catch them without having passed?
If we find them in violation,
Yep.
and that's the language we'll use for that, if they violate our ordinance, they have the potential of being cited like anyone else who's violating one of our ordinances, and that then falls within the court system. And we've actually worked out with our magistrate judge and our presiding judge of the Fifth Circuit a fee schedule, a fine and bond schedule is what it's called, that establishes those amounts, and that would be something that would be incorporated. But that's ultimately a decision by our presiding judge, not this council.
Okay. Just want to make sure that was clear. And then, so we were talking about the uninfested versus the infested, or uninfected versus the infested. we had decided when we voted on this the last time, we had deferred this. We weren't going to make this go into effect until we actually found the Emerald Ash Borer in Aberdeen. But based on our conversation tonight, I wonder if we want to revisit that. Based on some of the things that we heard based on some of the things we heard from everyone, I think we need to discuss that again tonight as to whether we want this to go into effect tonight. I'm kind of thinking I think it should.
Aaron?
Or go into effect 20 days or, whatever, after we pass it.
You're saying the calling it a nuisance should go into effect immediately, is what you're saying?
I think so, based on some of these things that we heard tonight, about moving things around, and I actually didn't write the notes, but I just wrote my notes. I'll
let Ron comment on this before I say anything.
I want the council to be aware of a distinction between effective date and enforcement. The effective date would be 20 days after the publication of the second reading of this ordinance. So arguably, we'd be looking at sometime in April when the ordinance itself becomes effective. What we have in the latter part of the ordinance is an enforcement delay, where we're telling city officials you will not enforce the ordinance until we have confirmed the finding of EAB within Brown County. And we put a delay for that because, again, we know that we want to have all of the structure and the organization in place once that confirmation is made, and then we're ready to move.
So is there anything in here that you think are there any portions of this? Thank you. Now it's on. Are there any portions of this, based on the conversation tonight, that you think we need to make go into effect or make?
You have in front of you on the screen is the first portion that says that the declaration of the nuisance is being made now, and that enforcement will be 15 days now after confirmation. Now, we anticipate that confirmation is going to be sometime later in 2019 or maybe early 2020. Is that right?
The confirmation.
When we actually find EAB in Brown County.
Well, it could be this year. It could be 4 years or 5 years from now. But
okay, well, once the confirmation is made, then we're ready to move on that. The next provision has to do with essentially the licensing and getting our contractors in line, our tree services up and ready to go, and to be responsibly dealing with this ash wood once it's found. That we would delay until January 1st, 2020.
Okay, so I just remembered why I made this note. It's because John told us that it is so difficult to figure out if these trees are infected or not. So what if we have trees infected for 3 months before we actually determine that one of them is infected? I mean, I listened to that and I thought, wait a second.
May I answer that? That's thinking ahead. And here's the thing: we never find the first tree. It's been in Sioux Falls for 3 years before we found it. So for 3 years, people were cutting trees and moving them around, or even taking them out of the city, maybe bringing them to Aberdeen. So you're right. I mean, when people say, well, you can't prove it's not here, of course I can. We will find it here, and when we find it here, it'll have been here for probably 3 years.
So it could be here now.
Yeah, exactly. Had this time last year, we were having meetings in Sioux Falls talking about what will happen when it arrives. And it arrived 2 weeks later, and it had already been there for 3 years.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear that once that process, and there is a process that we've built into this ordinance, that it requires the confirmation through a certified laboratory analysis, and then a notice of confirmation is placed in the local newspaper by our forester to let the world know, to at least let Aberdeen residents know that we are now going to enforce this. So I mean, I don't know what more we can do, but that's the strong process I think we put in place to make the declaration and to put us in a position where our citizenry is aware of and can now start working with the ordinance.
Well, I'm going to presume that we are obviously not going to pass second reading and enact this ordinance tonight. So where do we go from here? What's what's the process here to get to through the things that we have agreed on or not agreed on, and come up with something to bring back.
Can I make a couple of suggestions? I think 2A, we should have language within the ordinance that grandfathers individuals. I think that's an easy one. I think we should distinguish between a new license and a renewal of a license. And you can do that on an annual basis. I agree with you there. We should, not that it needs to be placed in the ordinance, but we should have the fee figured out for the initial and then the renewal. And we can give that to individuals. I'm going to see the 20-question test and see if I can pass, but maybe we should all get that. I agree with that. I think we should be able to see that. And
I got a different test for you.
Yeah, good. Hopefully it's not an accounting test. And then I think I would want us to prohibit firewood from any infected or quarantined county, some kind of language in that regard, and have that in the ordinance.
Okay.
This is going to impact your business significantly, correct?
That is correct.
And that is, I don't know how we don't do that. I mean, it's
Just from, if I may, an understanding process. The impact on my personal pocketbook doesn't even matter in relation to slowing the spread of the Emerald Ash Borer. Now, I want to be clear on that. I'm not in here today because of its impact on my family and my business necessarily. However, if undue regulation is in place that impacts it unneedingly, then of course I would be opposed to that. This pain to us locally in a business world is going to be relatively short-lived. Within however many years, if we can slow it, like Mr. Ball says, maybe 10 years, once it's here, and it's here, we're going to be within the quarantine area. We're going to be able to move wood freely about within that quarantine area. The main emphasis is on slowing its spread. And if you got a chance to see that map that shows the transportation corridors and the resulting balloons with each of those major corridors, it's about the only time from a business perspective I've been happy we're not on a major interstate transportational corridor, because it is following 90, 80, 35. I mean, it's just all along those highways. So, I mean, potentially, it's not going to breed its way here. It's going to get here on something with wheels, so it might not be this year. It may not be 3-5 years from now, because we have less things coming into Aberdeen than some of these larger metropolises. But once it's here, and once it's everywhere, then this will not have much of an impact anymore. We'll be able to bring firewood from Frederick or from Warner or wherever it is we may be. So, we've got a time frame. It's going to sunset itself, as Mr. Williams said.
Okay, how much, if we have a motion to postpone, how much time do we need?
If I had 2 weeks, what I would propose to do for the council is I would draft language consistent with what Councilman Busness just instructed. And then I would put that out, try to make that available if we could to that same group of stakeholders that we had said it to earlier, which was the tree services and we'll add you to it, Mr. Miller. And the app, I think we had some landscape businesses that we had also included. But we'll get that information out prior to the next meeting, give you an opportunity to look at that and either come to the meeting and make requested changes or contact me ahead of time and let me know. But I think I could do that if I had 2 weeks from today to get that information out.
Move to postpone for 2 weeks.
Second.
Motion Busness, second by Johnson. Carl, postpone. Everybody okay with that? Carl, roll call on the motion to postpone for 2 weeks.
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Slate Hansen.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Mayor Leveson.
Aye, motion carries, and thank you all for, we're all a lot smarter than we were when this started in relation to, I know I am.
I thought this was healthy.
It really was.
A healthy process. Thank you.
I especially appreciated the notes that you brought so that I could take notes on them.
It's very rare we have a meeting that goes this long where it's interesting. It was for me anyway. Lynn?
That's true.
When we're done.
What I was going to indicate, similar to the nuisance ordinance, so once Ron gets his draft done, I will post it on the city website in the front page, so anyone could have access to it if they want to see it.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, John, for making the trip up here tonight.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Okay, that now brings up our consent calendar, routine city business items A through E.
Moved.
Motion Lunsman, second by Slade Hansen. Any questions on any? All in favor of approving, then say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Opposed, no. Whoops, Carl, sorry.
Councilmember Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Slade Hansen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux. Mayor Leveson.
Aye. Motion carries. Next is rezoning. Brett?
This is located at 1514 6th Avenue Southwest. They're requesting a rezone from unrestricted industrial and highway commercial districts to highway commercial. Reason they're doing this is to get rid of the split zoning of the property in order to develop it commercially.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion Johnson, second by Bunceness. Questions, anyone? Carl?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Slade Hansen.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Mayor Leveson.
Aye. Motion carries. Item B, this is appointed time for a hearing on the transfer of a malt beverage and South Dakota Farm wine license with video lottery from James Frericks, doing business as Golden Acres Casino, to Trienta Incorporated, and included in the information we received, the health department still has to complete their inspection, but we're asking for an approval of the transfer at this point.
That inspection has been completed.
Okay. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion Olson, second by Bunceness. Carl?
Councilmember Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Slade Hansen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Leveson.
Aye, motion carries. The next liquor license is for the Boys and Girls Club wine tasting event on April 13.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion Olson, second by Lunsman. Carl?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Slade Hansen.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Mayor Leveson.
Aye, motion carries. And you have some bills listed for you, and I'd like a motion to approve payment of. So moved.
Second.
Motion Johnson, second by Bunceness. Carl?
Councilmember Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Slade Hansen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness. Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Leveson.
Aye, motion carries. Lynn informs me he has no report tonight.
Well, wait a second.
Oh, you do now?
Within my report, there was a memorandum from the city attorney dealing with cable franchise renewal costs and revenues, and he would like to make a quick statement about that memorandum.
How quick?
Everybody lay back and relax here. We'll be here a while.
We're not going anywhere.
I just wanted to point out to the council that it had made an investment in the process of renewing the franchise agreements with Midco and NVC, and that investment involved allowing me to hire a legal consultant to assist in a very complicated area of the law, and also in retaining a company to do the PEG study, the PEG study for us. The total investment of the council was just under $80,000, which looks to be a large dollar amount. However, I did want to tell the council that from what we're seeing with early fee remittances that are coming in, it looks like over the course of the 10-year franchise renewal, the value of that additional consultant and that $80,000 investment will turn into roughly $1.6 million in additional fees for the city.
I like the term investment. It's not an expense, it's an investment. I think I asked Lynn to do this. We need to keep track of increases that come from the providers to see if that has any impact in our revenue increase. So something just to keep in mind.
Watch your bills.
I don't have a bill, so someone else is going to have to speak up.
I do. Anything else from anyone before we adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion Bunsen, second by Olson. Carl? All in favor say aye.
Oh, there you go.
Aye.
Aye.
Good enough. Cheat on the last one.
All right. Thanks,
Hey.
gentlemen. Bye.